Hey, thanks for watching this review. Before we get started, if you're trying to choose the best surf skate for you, then I invite you to get my ultimate surfskate selector at surfskate.love. The surfskate selector includes over 100 models from the top 10 surfskate trucks, including Aquilo, Carver C7 and CX, Curveboard, Slide, Smoothstar, Spyskate, Swelltech, Waterborne, and YOW. All you have to do is answer 8 quick questions and the surfskate selector automatically eliminates every model that doesn't meet your specifications and gives you a very small list of only the very best surfskate models for you. So click the link in the video description below to get the ultimate surfskate selector now. Today we're reviewing the Aquilo Surfskate out of Bangkok, Thailand. The first thing we'll cover is who and what the Aquilo is best used for in context of all these other surf skates you see behind me. Next, I'll go into the truck itself, how it's built, how it functions and feels. Then I'll go into detail on all the other component parts of the model, the deck, the wheels, everything else. Then I'll go into the pros and cons of the Aquilo. And then finally, to finish off, as you know, I am not the best rider, and to compensate for that, I hired my friend Joey Daley, who's one of the best surf skaters I've ever seen, to drive up to Utah from California to stay a full week with me and to ride all of these surf skate trucks so that we could get his take on them as a very experienced and advanced rider. So after my review, you're going to get Joey Daley's take on the Aquilo in context of all of these other surf skate trucks. And in addition, the riding throughout this review that you're going to see is not going to be me, but Joey. And so Joey will just add a lot of depth to these reviews because he can push these boards to their full capabilities in a way that I just can't. Okay, so who and what is the Aquilo Surfskate best used for? Well, I've got the Aquilo in a lineup here. To date, I've invested more than $16,000 to purchase more than 60 surf skates, and that includes 28 different unique surf skate trucks. And after trying out all of those surf skates and all those different trucks, I've boiled them down to what I believe are the top 10 surf skate trucks in the world, and those are Swelltech, Curveboard, Smoothstar, Aquilo, Spyskate, YOW, Carver C7, Waterborne Surf Adapter, Carver CX, and Slide. And I've arranged these on a scale, and that scale is pure surf trainers on this side going down to street cruisers on this side. Now, I am not a surfer, so obviously I can't tell you which of these best replicate surfing, and I can't make any commentary on any of these trucks as relate to surfing. So how am I able to categorize them as pure surf trainers versus street cruisers? Well, what I've done is just reduce them to measurable properties that I can explain to you that will hopefully help you make buying decisions at home. So when you're on this far left side of the scale, these pure surf trainers, the properties of these surf skate trucks, and I'm just talking about these 5 right here, what I call pure surf trainers. So these trucks are very smooth, loose, and fluid. And that makes them very responsive to upper body movements, which is great, as I understand it, for technical surf training. Now, as a result, that means that when you pump them, they tend to generate more kind of lateral side-to-side motion with that front foot, as opposed to pulling you forward with more forward momentum like the street cruisers do. And so that means that these ones on this side of the scale, I find are best used in small areas on flat surfaces and for short distances. So that would be things like doing technical surf training, using cone drills on a tennis court, something like that. Then when you move to this side of the scale, the street cruisers, the characteristics are these trucks, the further right that you get, these trucks feel tighter and snappier. And as a result, that means that the trucks over here, I will use my lower body to pump them more, like my ankles and knees, I'll involve them more than you really have to with these other trucks on the other side. But one big difference on these street cruisers compared to the surf trainers is that they generate more forward momentum when you pump them. And for that reason, they're more versatile because you can go longer distances over a wider variety of terrain. Now, that does not mean that you can't use these on this side of the scale as pure surf trainers. In fact, there's a lot of surfers who will swear by some of these other trucks as pure surf trainers on this side of the scale too. So I find that as a rule, these trucks on this side of the scale tend to be more versatile than the ones as you move further left. Now in the middle here, I have 3 that I call hybrids, the YOW Meraki, the Carver C7, and the Waterborne. And by hybrid, I just mean that they're good at doing it all. They have the same characteristics as the pure surf trainers and some of the characteristics as the street cruisers, where they're going to give you that smoother, looser feel. They're going to give you a lot of rail-to-rail lean, but they're also going to generate a lot of forward momentum momentum. So I can use a YOW Meraki in the same way that I use a C7 or a CX for like long distance street cruising, whereas I'm not going to use the Smoothstar thruster, for example, for long distance street cruising, just because it has a different feel. So with all of that said, where I put the Aquilo in this context is in this range right here as the pure surf trainers, and that includes the Swelltech, the Curveboard, the Smoothstar thruster, the Aquilo, and the Spyskate. So these are the ones that in my experience, just based on the physical properties of them, these are ones that I'm just not going to be using in more versatile settings for longer distances. These would be just more technical surf maneuvers in smaller areas. And the reason why it's a little bit more further right to the scale is because as opposed to these three, I think it generates just a little bit more forward momentum, but I think that the Spyskate generates a little bit more forward momentum for longer distance pumping than the Aquilo. And so here's what this means. If you are a non-surfer, right out of the gate, I'm going to immediately say the Aquilo is for sure at least not going to be your first surf skate. And in fact, if you're a non-surfer like me, the only reason I can see that you would have to buy an Aquilo is if you have already bought a lot of other things. You're just a geek like me and you like surf skating and you have a quiver of other things first. Like to me, the Aquilo would be, as a non-surfer, would honestly be like maybe, you know, 5th or 6th down the list of things that I would recommend that you get before buying an Aquilo. Now, if you are a surfer, well, I can't be a lot of help on that because I can't tell you which of these 5 pure surf trainers or any of the others are the best for surf trainer or which one you're going to like best. But hopefully I can just kind of explain to you the differences between these trucks. Okay, so let's talk about the truck itself and how it feels and functions. If you look at this up close, you'll see that the exterior design of it is very similar to the YOW Meraki. Well, there's a big difference, and I'm going to show you inside. The YOW Meraki has a coiled compression spring inside this housing, whereas the Aquilo has a tension spring which wraps around the exterior of this housing. So in the Meraki you have a compression spring. In the Aquilo, Smoothstar thruster, and the Carver C7 you have the tension spring. The differences are, on a compression spring, when this truck is at center, the spring is not engaged. The spring is only engaged when I push on it, and then it's pushing back on me. On a tension spring, the springs are already engaged, and then we're pulling on them back and forth. So the result is, you can see how on this YOW Meraki, you can see how that has a really nice snap back to center, whereas the Aquilo doesn't have as much snap back to center, and it's the same thing again, same kind of similar effect on the Smoothstar thruster, where it's a bit more of a flop because it's that tension spring as opposed to the compression spring. And I'm pointing this out because that makes a very big difference in the ride, and it's that difference between the compression and the tension spring that really explains the main difference in feel between the YOW Meraki and the Aquilo, because obviously just in terms of the design alone, you know, these are the two that are probably most comparable, except the difference is the YOW Meraki is just tighter, has a tighter, snappier feel, it has a faster, quicker rebound to center, and this one has a smoother, looser, flowier feel. Another difference is that the YOW Meraki has a much deeper rail-to-rail lean than the Aquilo. Let me demonstrate some rail-to-rail lean for you. Let's start with the YOW Meraki, because I think of everything we've got up here, the YOW Meraki has the deepest rail-to-rail lean. Moving on to the Carver C7, which I think is fairly similar to the Meraki, maybe not quite as much as the Meraki, but in the same range. Spyskate, not quite as much as either of those, but deeper than the other ones to my right. Smoothstar actually does not have very much rail-to-rail lean comparatively to the YOW Meraki and C7. So you can see the lean on this thruster. Here is the Curveboard, and the Curveboard has more lean with more riser, but you can see, so on this one has a fairly high riser. You can see how you'll get some lean out of that with a riser. And here is the Swelltech, which you have about that range of motion on the Swelltech before it jackknifes on you. So it's actually not very much rail-to-rail lean on the Swelltech, it's deceiving. And now that you've seen all those, here is the Aquilo in context. And I don't know if you can see this, but of all of these trucks, I think the two that have the lowest rail-to-rail lean are the Aquilo and the Curve board. Now, if you're a surfer, I have no idea if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea how much rail-to-rail lean you get on a surfboard and how much you care about that. I can tell you that for me personally, having no relation to water, that's honestly kind of the single biggest reason why I don't like the Aquilo is that lack of rail-to-rail lean. Because when I'm doing deep carves on a CX or a Meraki, I really like that deep rail-to-rail lean. It just feels good to me. Even though it looks visually almost identical to the YOW Meraki, in terms of its feel, it actually feels more like the Smoothstar thruster. If you prefer the feel of the Smoothstar thruster over the YOW Meraki for surf training, then I'm going to say that you should give the Aquilo a shot, and here's why. The Aquilo will feel very similar to the Smoothstar thruster. It has the same very loose, fluid, flowy feel, and the relatively low rail-to-rail lean as compared to the YOW Meraki. But there's a very big difference, and that is how far back the axle offsets your wheelbase. So when you look at the Smoothstar thruster, you can see how this axle hangs down, and so that means that you're actually changing the wheelbase. So it's deceptive. You'll see that you have your bolt holes up here, but your axle is actually hanging 4 inches back here below this. And that means that on the Smoothstar thruster, you can really only put your foot over here, and it means you have to have a longer deck to accommodate a wider stance width. So the Smoothstar thruster offsets your wheelbase by 4 inches. The YOW Meraki offsets your wheelbase by 1.75 inches. The Aquilo only offsets your wheelbase by 1 inch. So what that means is that on the Aquilo, you're going to get the same feel that you get out of the Smoothstar thruster, but with a shorter, more nimble deck. All right, now let's take this Aquilo Surfskate truck apart and see what's inside. Now, before I do, I want to just show you, I've got a YOW Meraki here. The difference between the Meraki and the Aquilo is really just the spring. In the Meraki, you have this coiled compression spring, and in the Aquilo, I'm going to show you, we have a longer, softer tension spring. Now, to take apart this Aquilo truck, we could take it off of the deck and we could remove the truck axle hanger right here, but we don't need to. All we want to do is get inside this truck housing here, and so all we really have to do is remove this nut right here. Now, you can do it, the only kind of advantage to removing the truck and axle right here is that, you know, if you're trying to unscrew it with, say, a skate tool, you're going to be knocking against this. Well, there's a simple solution to that. Just use a socket set. And you're going to see, again, it's the same general design. We've got the nut on top. So sitting on top of the housing, just like the Meraki, we have a set of channel washers with a set of bearings that sits inside of them, just like that. That goes on top. Now, here's the big difference. Here's the Meraki spring. Here is the Aquilo spring. So you can see they have these longer, thinner springs that are wrapped in a circle around the housing. And it's interesting because they have a built-in mechanical stopper right here. This piece right here is going to sit into this channel right here, and that is your built-in mechanical stopper right there. That limits your range of motion. And then also, just like the YOW Meraki, inside here you have your brass or copper piece, whatever this is here, and then your other set of washers down there. Now, something to note about the Aquilo is that it is adjustable because they give you interchangeable springs that are different thicknesses. The original that comes with it is 1.6 millimeters in thickness. Then they have one that is 1.8 millimeters in thickness, and then they have the thickest one is 2 millimeters in thickness. And they say that this one is for riders over about 180 pounds. Now, personally, I don't notice a huge difference with changing out the springs, but you do notice a difference. And so that gives you a bit of an advantage over, say, the YOW Meraki, where that you're stuck with that spring tension. That's what you get. Putting this back together is a little bit trickier than the YOW Meraki. Let me show you how I've had to do that. One unique thing to note about the Aquilo versus the Meraki is that the Meraki has, on the upper housing, has this channel to lock for the spring to lock into as well. The Aquilo does not have that. This upper housing is completely flat. And it's this piece right here that just sets in between the springs in here like so. And this makes it kind of tricky to put together. Let me show you how I've learned how to put this together. So first of all, you're going to want to see that the ends of these springs will go over. They have places for those springs to sit into just like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to have one spring already in the channel, and then you'll have one just kind of hanging loose out here. And then you'll take your top truck housing, and this will just sit over there. This piece right here is going to lock into this channel, and this piece right here is going to lock into this groove right here on this side of the spring. And then we're going to just, once we have it in place, we'll twist this, which will pull this spring around, opening up space for this spring to lay down into that channel like so. All right, so we slide this into the grooves. We pull that spring aside, opening up that channel. And then this one is going to sit into that groove like so. It's not the easiest process. And there we go. Now we got to hold that on tight since there's no grooves up top on this upper housing. Now we're going to take our channel washers. We're going to put one channel up, followed by our bearings, followed by our other channel washer, with the channel washers obviously, or the channel sandwiching the bearings like so. Followed by our nut. And we'll just cinch this down. Same thing with the Meraki. You don't want to over tighten this because you'll squeeze your bearings, but if you don't have it tightened enough, you'll have play in that truck. So you want it to be just snug. And there is your Aquilo truck. Now let's talk about the complete model of the Aquilo, not just the truck. So at the time of making this review, they offer two models, a 30-inch model and a 32-inch model. I have the 32-inch model, and if you look on their website, you'll see that they have different deck designs, but that really is just different graphic designs, same exact shape and dimensions on the board. Now, one really unique thing about the Aquilo is that they have like 5 or 6 different decks to choose from in those model specifications, and then they have different colored wheels, they have different colored trucks, and so what they do is they allow you to kind of build your own complete system. Given that the Aquilo truck only offsets your wheelbase by 1 inch, that means that their 30 and 32 inch models really are going to fit pretty much every rider out there. I am 6 feet 2 inches tall. I have an 18-inch stance width. By 18 inches, I mean that's the distance measured between my inner feet and my socks in my natural stance. And so that means that this 32-inch model, which is not a super long deck, you know, typically at my height and stance width, I'm on more of like a 33 to 34 inch models. It's a shorter model that will accommodate my wide stance width, which is fantastic. Now, Aquilo has also told me that they're coming out with a 34-inch model that will open up that even more for taller riders with even wider stance widths. Now, as far as all of the components parts go on the Aquilo, let's start with the deck. I am not honestly a big fan of this deck, and the two biggest reasons are, one, just kind of the shape of how it tapers off in this back end, and you've got really great wide foot placement on this front foot. But then I never like, a lot of decks do this where it tapers off towards the back, and so you just don't have as wide of foot placement on the back. But I guess the biggest reason I don't like it is the lack of concave. This is a very flat deck. It also doesn't have a lot of kicktail. So it's kind of just not a super exciting deck. It gets the job done, it's fine, it works, but it's on the flatter side. If you're doing like tight, aggressive carving or like bull riding, your foot will tend to slip around on this a little bit, and you don't have that kind of super locked in feel that you get with decks with a lot of concave. And to be honest, I would kind of say that about all of the component parts. Everything's fine, it's functional, it works, but I don't think that you're getting like the highest quality component parts. But having said that, I do think it's a little bit pricey. although I don't know what it's priced like in Asian countries, in the US, and of course I'm paying for shipping too. So I paid $310 for this board. And to give you context, you're gonna pay in the US, you're gonna pay probably $360 to $375 for a YOW, about the same for a Smoothstar, about $375 for a Smoothstar. Spicegate models are $369, and then this model is $429. So this is the highest price model that you see here. So that puts this at $310 in context. Personally, as far as all the component parts go, I think that Carvers are more well built than honestly anything up here, and you're going to pay $250 to $265 for a Carver, depending on if you get a CX or a C7 truck. Now let's talk about pros and cons of the Aquilo. The first pro that I would say is just that it's a great surfskate truck. They've really made a great contribution to the surfskate market with the new original truck. Even though it looks similar to the YOW Meraki, you really have a different design with those tension springs going around the housing that creates a different feel. It's very smooth, very loose, very fluid, really great feel on that truck. The next thing I would say is that that low rail-to-rail lean makes it very stable for beginners. I think the Aquilo works well for beginner riders. The next big advantage I would say to the Aquilo is that you only lose 1 inch of wheelbase as compared to 1.75 inches on the YOW Meraki and 4 inches on the Smoothstar thruster. And that means that you can have shorter decks on the Aquilo than you need on either a YOW Meraki or a Smoothstar thruster, which makes your setups smaller, more nimble. The next pro I would say to the Aquilo is that they sell the truck separately, which I really like because not all companies do that. And that's a great option for customizers. It also means it's a great option for non-surfers like me. I think really it's mostly surfers are going to be looking at the Aquilo, but if you're a non-surfer and you already have a quiver and you want to add the Aquilo to your quiver, I'm actually probably going to recommend, if you're a good customizer, to probably just buy that truck alone and put it on any other setup that you have with your YOW Meraki or whatever, and it's going to work great on that. And then the final pro I would say to the Aquilo is that I like their customization process, that where you can pick your deck and your wheels and your truck. I think it's very unique that we've never seen in the marketplace. Now these are what I would say are the cons of the Aquilo. They may or may not be cons for you, but for me the cons are, first and foremost, I'm not a huge fan of that comparatively low rail-to-rail lean. That's all purely personal preference. I'm a bigger fan of the deeper rail-to-rail lean on the YOW Meraki, a Carver C7, or a Carver CX. But if you like the Smoothstar thruster over the YOW Meraki, then, as I said, you might like that Aquilo too, because it has that more rail-to-rail lean that's more similar to the Smoothstar thruster as opposed to the YOW Meraki. The next con for me on the Aquilo is that it just doesn't generate as much forward momentum when you're pumping, and that's the main reason why, as a long-distance street cruiser, I don't ride the Aquilo a lot, is that lack of forward momentum. Whereas on the YOW Meraki, you get a lot more momentum when you pump. The next con for me on the Aquilo is that the truck is heavy. Of these 10 Surfskate trucks that you see here, the 3 heaviest, all of which are over, and the only ones that are over 2 pounds, are the Spicegate, the Aquilo, and the Waterborne Surf Adapter, with the Spicegate being the heaviest, the Waterborne being the second heaviest, and the Aquilo being the third heaviest. And I find that just limits your versatility when you have that much weight on the front of your board. But that's fine when we're categorizing this as a pure surf trainer, where it's really kind of a non-issue if that's all you're using it for. The next con for me is, as I've said, I'm just not a huge fan of all of the component parts of the Aquilo. I like the truck. Not a big fan of the complete system, but again, that's a lot of personal preference as well. But you've seen it visually, and maybe you can put your own personal preference into it, but that's just me. And then the final thing that I would say is I do just think that the Aquilo is a bit pricey. I think that if you're in the US, that you're going to be much better off honestly going with a Carver for $250 to $265 as opposed to an Aquilo for $310. And personally, if it's me, I would actually rather spend the money, say $350 to $360 on a YOW over $310 for an Aquilo. I find that the YOW is a better system than the Aquilo, but that's just me. So that is my take on the Aquilo. And with all of that said, now let's hear what Joey Daley has to say about the Aquilo. Let's start here, Joey. Who is the Aquilo for? What is it best used for? Is this a pure surf trainer? Is it a street cruiser? Is it a hybrid that can do it all?
I feel like this board is a hybrid that can do virtually anything that a pure surf trainer can do, as well as compete with the CX and like just regular board riding, to be honest. It has a nice open flow, but as you can see, the springs always retract it back to that main center. That's a huge thing for surf skating, in my opinion.
On that scale from pure surf trainer to street cruiser, which is it more like? Is it more like a surf trainer or more like a street cruiser?
I'd put it more on that spectrum of a straight surf trainer. It does give you the ability to utilize all of your surroundings, and I feel like it has that flowy, that deep side-to-side carve pump that you need for specific surf training as well. The truck is really flowy. It has a very smooth and clean focal point.
And then what else about this system? Any other notable things that you want to mention about the whole system itself?
I like the wheels. The wheels are nice and really good for surf skating purposes. The deck and this tail is very nice. It gives you a lot of drive and pump. The only thing I dislike is right here in the center point. There's a completely flat spot. You can feel it when you're pumping from rail to rail. When you try to get your deep into the carve, you kind of feel your foot slide with that straight center. I do like the design of the board. However, I feel as if it could have lost a little bit of width here in the front, or they could have evened it out here towards the back. Overall,
so you want it to be as wide back here as it is up here, or as narrow up here as it is back there.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't like how it widens out here and then narrows back here.
Very true.
Do you think the Aquilo is suitable for beginners, intermediate, or advanced riders?
Honestly, I feel like the Aquilo can accommodate literally anybody from beginner to advanced. I feel like as a beginner, it would be great for starting out, learning how to get your rail-to-rail leans and carves. And for an advanced rider, I mean, I think this.
And you think it's stable enough for a beginner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as an intermediate, you definitely will like advance and learn new things. And whereas advanced riders would just pretty much take this into a playground and create art.